This episode is brought to you by Pentester Academy TV, the leader online cybersecurity education. Cybersec Community Chat.
Hello to all viewers, welcome to another episode of Cybersec Community Chat. I am your host, Damien. Today we are pleased to have John from OT-ISAC on board to this episode of Chit Chat sessions. Let's get our conversation started. Hello John. Hello John. It's a pleasure to have you on board to this episode of Cybersec Community Chat. To kick off these sessions, how about you share about yourself, your journey into cybersecurity industry?
Hi, Damien. Thank you for inviting me here to share, certain thoughts about cybersecurity. So my name is John Lee. So I'm working for the Global Resilience Federation Asia Pacific office. I'm running the OT Information Sharing Analysis Center. So I started in IT industry more than 20 years ago. Having studied business and computing. So I wondering whether I should embark on a career in auditing or computing. So I choose computing. So those days I was doing system administration, system analysis and software development, application and business consultancy for service providers. So about 20 years ago, I became a regional chief information officer. And information security was quite new. It's one of the areas of my responsibility, including infrastructure and applications. And I took some certifications in information security, such as the ISC, CISSP certifications, the ISAC certifications as well. And at the same time, I was also volunteering in the Singapore chapter of ISAC. I was its past president. So I found that this interaction among the members, because they come from different views as well as different domains and different industries, different roles within the organization, that stimulate a lot of thinking through this networking and exchange of information about the importance of cybersecurity, because cybersecurity is a much needed domain in all facets of industry, whether you're coming from financial or manufacturing or even service industries. We heard a lot of cases, recent cases, as well as cases as far back as 20 years ago or 10 years ago. And there are many domains such as application networking, identity access management, security operations, security architecture, security engineering. And so I found it was very interesting because it is diversified view, because attacks can come from any of these domains. And over the last 10 years, my interest in cybersecurity took a more increased focus, participating in forums, in talks, and in interviews or forums such as this.
Yeah, John, it is quite a long journey for 20 years, and I'm pleased to have another veteran on board to talk about his journeys, about his new insight. Now, you mentioned, that now you are currently with OT-ISAC. What is it and what does it do in the industry?
Operational Technology Information Sharing Analysis, or OT-ISAC, it was officially launched on 1st October 2019, so almost 2 years old now. The focus when it started was on Singapore's critical information infrastructure sectors, or OT sectors, such as energy, water, land transport, maritime, aviation, telco, media, government, healthcare, and manufacturing. So OT-ISAC facilitates sharing of threat information and OT system vulnerabilities to advance the security and the resilience of our member companies and agencies in the community. So our mission is ensuring resilience of all critical OT sectors in Singapore and all the members in the other countries. So we do have a membership outside of Singapore, in ASEAN, in Middle East, and US. and Australia as well. So as membership grows, we organically grow as well. We add additional resources, which may be our team of analysts or our partners, which will provide information for our members. And with the support of Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore and our members, the community have expanded. And our goal is to reach a critical mass. We started small because really we started from ground zero. But over 2 years, we have built a community of members. The OT-ISAC is headquartered in Singapore. So we enhance security by providing early warning, mitigating cyber, physical, or geopolitical threats or attacks targeting OT systems and sectors using those systems. We provide analysis, from our analysts as well as from our partners, and members are able to share threat information, requests for information, requests for vulnerability for the equipments they are using, and we will share advanced persistent threat, malware, samples and indicators of compromise, which includes IP addresses, file names, malicious hashes, and other technical details. So this will help them to advance the resilience of their sectors of their company. And we are part of a global network of ISACs in the US. So the other ISACs are Health ISAC, Financial Services ISAC, Oil and Gas ISAC, Energy ISACs, Space, Retail K-12, which caters for the education, Pro6, which is a community of consultancy, legal services, and of course, operational technology. We are also part of Singapore OT Cybersecurity Master Plan, published by the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore in 2019. We are mentioned under Key Trust 2.
Okay. That is quite interesting because is OT security, as you mentioned, is kind of new, 2 years, 2 years old. What's the difference between IT security and OT security? Is there a big difference or any difference?
Yeah, there is a difference, and understanding this difference is important because now we are talking about OT versus IT security. OT is hardware and software that is linked to physical devices or that controls processes that trigger events in the organizations. So these are monitoring these systems. Many times they use IT components to monitor the hardware. So it's any hardware or software that control cyber physical systems. Whereas IT, traditionally we know, we talk about applications, network, and interfaces. So it's the development of computer systems for processing data. So there is a distinction because for the longest time, operational technology was under the purview of operational or engineering departments. So they look after OT systems. But now we are seeing that there is actually a marriage or a overlap of both IT and OT. So OT focuses on monitoring control of physical processes, and IT systems supports the enterprise operations in terms of the processing of the data and information. So some examples of OT systems are your energy systems, water treatment plants, your autonomous guided vehicles, MRI machines used in the hospitals, robotics for manufacturing. So one aspect of IT security, we know, practitioners know the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So IT security looks or focuses on securing these three elements or three principles of the information security. Where OT security, the focus is more not so much on that, but more on safety, reliability of the systems, and productivity. So security designed for IT are now being applied to OT because of the connection. And however, OT has additional areas where you need to actually manage. And using IT for OT, I think it's one step, but not the entire equation. I mean, you cannot actually secure OT systems just relying alone on IT.
Yeah, as you mentioned, thank you for explaining, the differences. As you mentioned in your response, it seems like there's a convergence between the IT and OT security. There must be some challenges that OT security are facing with this inception going on. Will you be able to share what are the common challenges that people will see in OT cybersecurity then?
I think you rightly say because we are seeing a lot of this digital transformation and the use of IT networks or internet for OT operations, including remote monitoring of OT systems, from away from the workplace. Before, the OT environment was traditionally air-gapped. So if you speak to a lot of these OT engineers, they'll tell you there's no risk because my systems are air-gapped. But due to the need for productivity gains, there are more connection data has been transferred from OT systems. So take, for example, your energy systems, where you need to do billing to customers that consumes the resources. So these billing systems is on the IT systems. So data from the OT systems on the usage needs to be transferred across. So there's a risk because you're connecting OT systems, which were traditionally air-gapped, with IT systems. So some of the challenges these are not exhaustive, but we are seeing that in the OT environment, even the asset inventory, asset discovery is a challenge. Organizations may not have the full asset inventory. And if you do not know what you have, it's very difficult to assess whether there are controls. And many times there are no controls because you do not know that these assets have been connected into your network, the OT networks. And secondly, access control over the assets that are connected in the OT environment, over devices, network connections, users. This is important to have and to administer proper access management. And we are seeing a lot of the segregation of duties between OT and IT, siloed mentality. This is actually part of the organization structure of both the OT and IT teams, run by separate departments, managed by differently. And so this siloed approach will create a lot of gaps, especially when we are using things like Internet of Things for automation. And whose responsibility is it to secure this security of these devices? The devices are procured by engineers, but not knowing how to assess whether it is secured when connected to the network, the IT and OT networks. So overlapping solutions like this, I think there's a gap if you do not remove the siloed mentality and have a convergence of both IT and OT management within the organizations, just like as you mentioned, IT and OT convergence in the industry or out there. But what about the organizations? You need to converge both IT and OT thinking and mindset so that they work as one to protect the organizations. It's not just an engineering issue or IT issue, it's organizational issues. And I mentioned about working from home, remote operations, the optimizations of the equipment remotely, collecting of data from OT systems for IT, like the billing information that is needed. So these connections also need to be protected. We've seen in May this year, one of the breach involves a breach over the use of a remote user that was not terminated. The user has actually left the organization, so the credentials were stolen and was used to breach the system. So there are many cases of this happening, and while we are focusing on the cost aspect, but the interoperability are the challenge, interoperability between IT and OT. So what would be ideal would be integration of IT and OT together, both at the organization level and at the technology, the systems level, process level, and embedding security into each of this, security by design, security as early as possible into the architecture and design.
Yeah, I think, any convergence is going to take time for everything to, kind of become better or even faster or efficient. I think with digitalization going in place, I think it will speed up even faster for the convergence to, kind of stabilize and stuff like that. And your sharing, I think a lot of challenges will, overcome, I think in years as we're proceeding. Moving back to, information sharing, information sharing has always been very private, very secretive. What's the challenges for organization to share their information? What's the hurdle that you guys face? Sharing information is always very private, very secretive.
Yeah, I think the concept of information sharing started in the late 1990s when President Clinton issued a presidential directive 63 for critical information infrastructure to share information. It is new in Asia, it is new in Singapore, certainly. And Singapore has taken a step to bring this into the community. I think it's good. For the longest time, governments have been sharing information, security agencies have been sharing information, military have been sharing information. If you look at military organizations, they have this called signals intelligence, which is the information intelligence arm of the military. So companies are not familiar with information sharing. They are familiar with security services provided by managed security service provider, MSSP. So they believe that services that they need, they procure. So they don't understand how it is that you can share information to enhance your cyber resilience when there's no monetary transactions. And secondly, they are not confident of sharing information because they believe in security by obscurity, meaning that the lesser I reveal, the better, the more secure I am. So if I have an incident, I wouldn't want to share the incident. Not only the whole world will know about the weaknesses, how the attackers managed to breach my cyber defense to get into the assets to exfiltrate the data. So again, a lot of education is needed in telling the community that there is really no risk in sharing information. Information is shared in the ISAC with complete anonymity, meaning that if you share information, you're not sharing about your company, what was breached, what was lost, or the data was lost. You're sharing about the event itself, the tactics, techniques, and procedures, and the indicators of compromise, such as malicious file hashes, the domain name IP addresses, or even threat actors, what geographical area they are from, so that other members within the community can take the actions and protect against these similar attack vectors. And I think the future of responsible information sharing is something that we really want to educate the industry. That there's really no risk, but there are benefits in sharing information because other organizations can actually benefit from the information that you shared about the incident. So one member's detection is another member's protection. So we are trying to build this community of trust, and that entails a lot of support from government to actually create the trust within the community, just like in the US when they have to issue presidential directives. And recently, during the May 2nd, when the pipeline was breached on the East Coast, on May 12th, the President Biden then issued an executive order for critical information infrastructures to actually beef up their cyber security resilience and as well as share information about incidents and events.
Yeah, you mentioned about a lot of education to the members about information sharing, the change of mindset. After 2 years, how do you feel the members are now? Are they more willing to share the information now?
There are, in terms of maturity, different levels of maturity. If you look at the recent McKinsey report, they surveyed 1,000 companies, I think it was a few months ago. So on a scale of 1 to 4, they measured against the cyber maturity model. Most companies are at level 2 when they are starting to develop their cyber capabilities within the organization. But the end goal is to achieve at a level which is at 3 or 4. So what this means is that you are proactively looking for sources of threats and information, and applying collective defense, which is information sharing, and looking at active cyber defense, which is basically building a cyber defense. That's what we know about blue teaming, right, and red teaming. So again, there are a lot of these kind of principles out there, but it's really the thought process. It's not a systems, but the principle is just a framework for you to apply to actually get in your processes, your people, process, and technology to work in one. And we see people as a weak link, because if we collaborate, we come together, we agree on the process, we use a common methodology, common systems, we are able to increase our cyber resilience better, right? Than working in silos. I shared about IT and OT working in silos. So certainly we want to bring that to our members. Looking back from 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and now, level of maturity for some organizations has moved up. So the needle has been moved a little bit, but we like to move the needle more, okay? So that the whole industry is brought from level 2 to level 3 or 4.
Yeah. That will be more education to go on, as years to come. I think we're definitely moving. At least there is an improvement. There's an improvement means people will grow eventually.
Right.
Yeah.
Education is important. And we launched the OT-ISAC Training Academy at our summit 2 weeks ago on 8th of September. We had 3 workshops. And last year, we also invited Pentesting Academy, the CEO to present. So we look at different areas of domains, and then we get the subject matter experts to come in and talk to our members or community. So we welcome non-members also in the summit, because really we want to raise the awareness of what solutions are out there and what capabilities are out there, and most important, application of the solutions and capability to your environment, because not all solutions there's no one size fits all. And training the people is important, because giving them the necessary skills to look for solutions and systems, and not just taking it from the vendor, but training the end users so that they are able to help themselves, not be spoon-fed by the vendors who will give you a solution, which is good because they are the experts in that area.
I think that is quite a good response on the questions. Being 20 years into this industry of cybersecurity, were you able to share some tips and advice? How can one start their cybersecurity career? And also, because now you are in the OT security domain, will you be also emphasize or tell us what's the special skill sets that's required to go into this domain?
The skill set is, I think in domain knowledge, the skill set is very wide, and every day I'm beginning to find out more and more. We support 10 critical information infrastructure and sectors, and when you talk to them, I think domain knowledge is very important. You may know a framework or systems, but really how that applies to the environment. So starting from my journey in cybersecurity, I would say that I did not have a goal to be in cybersecurity, because when I started like 20 over years ago, IT and business, that was the focus of my academic studies, and I was contemplating a career between financial versus computing. So I chose computing. And I think for cybersecurity, which is now becoming a hot topic because of the need to secure systems and assets and companies against cyber breaches. So it's a good area for the people to embark into if you are thinking about cybersecurity as a career, or even for mid-career professionals. Decide in what roles you want to embark on, whether it's network security, application security, governance, risk compliance, or even IT audits, or even maybe interested in security operations or cyber security analysis. So then you accumulate experience in the domain that you're interested in, as well as other domains that are complementary. So for example, if you are in application security, you may want to find out more about network security, because applications do run on network. And you start with one, you get to more knowledge, because it will make it easier for you to pivot or jump to other opportunities. And networking is important to join a community, to gather information, talk to people about what kind of opportunities and jobs. Take certifications. I mentioned some of the certifications. So they will demonstrate your knowledge as well as your due diligence when your prospective employer look at your CV. Enroll in a academic program if your background is not in IT or information security, because you do need to have a foundation in cybersecurity and gain experience. So once you have all these criteria, you apply for a job, then you're ready to start with your journey, and then you need to prove yourself when you're into the job. So take on projects and initiate projects. So I've seen some staff that actually is proactive, meaning they suggest or propose a project on cybersecurity. For example, honeypot, or maybe trawling the net for getting threat intelligence, implementing a system to automatically trawl the net for gathering threat intelligence. So this shows your initiative, and secondly, it gives you experience, because company provide a platform for you to try on these projects so that you are able to get the experience and visibility for your career, and participate in capture the flag and talks, webinars. So a lot of opportunities, a lot of growth, and it's not one size fits all, and it's not pure academic, just learning. So like 20 over years ago, you go to university, you get a degree, and then you don't need to study anymore. You study on the job. But now there's a lot of continuous learning, online, fixed classes, short classes, and all that. So I think a lot of tremendous opportunity, a lot of excitement for the people embarking on this cybersecurity career, and of course, financial rewards waits for you.
Thank you for sharing some of your tips and advice. Moving on, in 20 years, will you, if you can travel back in time in 20 years, to advise your younger self, what will you advise again?
I think I would leverage. That's a very good question, because risk is about looking back in time. If you had known then what you know now, you would have taken the actions and you'll be more successful, right? So again, I would have taken more risks 20 over years ago, maybe to start a project, a company or etc. Because I talk to a lot of young people who are now very enterprising. There are a lot of entrepreneurship. So you gain a lot by learning. You gain a lot by failing. Okay, but of course, I would also encourage you to join big organizations to beef up your CV to mitigate the risk while you are embarking on a entrepreneurship. But at the same time, you need to gain experience working for the big four or big companies to gain experience. In case your entrepreneurial initiative do not work, then you can pivot back to the workforce. So both are important. So I think taking that risk 20 over years ago, try and learn by failing. I would have done that. Someone told me just to try, 20 years ago, but I took the safe route. Find a job, study, and then find a job with a big company, and then just work your way up, which I did. But I would have done it differently. But back then, the circumstances, the environments was different than now.
Thank you, John, for being so openly and candid about sharing your own reflection with regards to that. I think it's, kind of also good for the viewers to understand, some of the lessons they can learn. Sometimes you're thinking back, how will you advise your younger self? I myself also was like thinking. I think thank you, John, for sharing that on a personal level. Before we wrap up the whole conversations, I have a last questions that I will tap on your thoughts. What's your thoughts on organization should hold third-party vendors accountable to appropriate security controls?
Now, this is a wonderful question to wrap up the discussion, because we heard about the SolarWinds attacks and the Kaseya attacks on software supply chain vulnerabilities, and big companies like the solution providers, they were breached, and they are the ones that were first reported the incident last year. So I guess it is not an easy solution for companies to ensure supply chain security, or how to hold vendors accountable. So I would start with contracts. You need to know what you're buying, procuring from the third-party vendors, to come up with a contract, to put financial liabilities in the contract. Financial liability is a deterrent control. So the vendors would actually be more motivated to actually ensure security. And in the contract, you would specify your requirements for information security. So you have an information security policy within your organizations, and your vendors need to uphold to that information security policies, because they can be a weak points if they don't uphold your policies, and have SLA, service level agreements, that would have metrics for measuring, monitoring performance of the vendor, and to provide assurance, third-party audits such like the SOC controls or the service organization control would provide a level of assurance, because these audits are done by independent third-party organizations that will audit the vendors, and vendor has to show you the audit reports, whether it's SOC 2 or SOC 3 reports. Of course, if you are a customer, they may provide you a SOC 2 depending on the level of your project, but generally they provide you a SOC 3 to say that they are complying with this standard, and these are the controls they have in place. Whereas a SOC 2 is more demonstrating that the controls are there, and SOC 2 Type 2 would demonstrate the controls are working over a period of time, generally at least 6 months. And internally, you have to have a cybersecurity supply chain risk management program, whether it's officially or unofficially, to provide more checks on the vendors, such as integrity checks on the vendors, have in place a process for vetting vendors, their financial viability, their reputation, how they do their operations, and most important, references from other customers that have used them before, because these will tell you a lot about how good or not so good the vendors are. And have a governance structure to manage this supply chain risk management program, process to filter out, segregate the critical vendors, products and services, because these are the ones that you really want to focus on to ensure that they have the highest level of integrity and security for the services they provide to your organizations. And constantly have vendor management review with them, with your internal organizations, to ensure that there are appropriate resources to support security in the vendor's environment.
Thank you, John, for sharing your thoughts, and I think it's quite well rounded off on the questions of the thoughts on the third party staff questions. I think our this is the end of the whole conversations, and I want to thank you for coming on board to these sessions to have this chit chat session with me on various topics that we talked about, and we do hope that the viewers enjoy the session between you and me, and learns a lot from you, from your responses.
Thank you so much, Davian. Thank you for inviting me to this fireside chat.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to all viewers watching this conversation between John and me, and do see you guys on our next Cybersec Community Chat. Bye bye everyone, stay safe.
Bye.